I've played Star Wars Outlaws. In fact, I rolled credits on it last night. What's happening, guys? Welcome back to another video, and today I have my review of Star Wars Outlaws. And if you haven't been keeping up with this game, this is Ubisoft's take on an open-world Star Wars game. It's a totally original story set at the height of the Empire during the golden age of Star Wars, and Ubisoft sent over a code for me to play the game early on Xbox. And it's a good Star Wars game, but it's got a couple of things that hold it back from really being great. Here's my spoiler-free review of Star Wars Outlaws. Right off the bat, the story in Outlaws is one of the standout great parts of the game. You play as Kay Vess, a lifelong thief and scoundrel who has pulled heists her entire life, but for her it's not really about the money. It's about finally being able to get away from the scoundrel life and start over fresh. And at the beginning of Star Wars Outlaws, Kay is set up with the score of a lifetime to make that happen. Slero is the rich head of a crime syndicate called Zarek Bash, and you're breaking into his mansion to grab millions and millions of credits that could set you up for life. But Kay isn't flying solo. Nix is her little cat-style alien companion that's been with her for years and is way more than a pet. And we'll talk about Nix more in a minute because he pulls some heavy weight when it comes to the minute-to-minute gameplay. Now obviously one Han Solo style character and an alien cat that's actually called a Mercall, for you Star Wars nerds out there, aren't going to be able to pull this one off alone. And that's kind of where the main story of Star Wars Outlaws kicks off. It's an Ocean's 11 style story of a no-name thief scouring the underworld for the most skilled experts in the galaxy that can pull off the job and cruise into the sunset. And for what it's worth, going directly after the main quest took me about 12 hours. But in the background of the story, you've got a set of gangs that are constantly going head to head, fighting to take over more of the galaxy. You've got the Pikes, the Hutts, Crimson Dawn, and the Yashiga clan, and the choices that you make throughout the game change your relationship with each faction. If your Crimson Dawn reputation goes up, someone else typically goes down, and this faction system doesn't play a major part in the main campaign. It pops up a couple of times to let you know that it's there and show you what it does, but it definitely adds additional meat to the game to keep things interesting after rolling credits on the main campaign. And as you build a reputation with each faction, you can unlock cosmetic sets for Kay and Nix that eventually give a little gameplay buff. Nothing too wild or OP, but it's a nice touch to give some real rewards for putting in the work for one faction over another. And then you've got random world events, these little optional side missions that pop up as you're cruising a planet on your speeder. These are little 5-minute side quests where you'll defend a base or get in the middle of an Imperial fight to swoop in and steal the goods. World events and plenty of enemy bases that are scattered across planets bring plenty to see and do in this open world, but the hub cities are really where the beauty of Star Wars Outlaws shines. In the top right corner of the screen, Opportunities Are Available pops up as a reminder that you can wander around and talk to NPCs that probably have jobs if you want to take them, and this does a great job of capturing that sense of wandering around a cantina, chatting with scumbags, and finding your next gig before heading out to make it happen. Now the main quest line is obviously the star of the show and the reason to play the game, but even after mainlining the story, my menu is packed with other side missions to go after that'll earn credits and change Kay's reputation and upgrade equipment. The game keeps going after that main quest is done. Now that's an overview of the Star Wars Outlaws experience, but one of the big claims that Ubisoft makes about this game is that it's the first truly open world Star Wars game. And while that's technically true, that's also a bit of a stretch. I said this earlier in the summer when I went hands-on for 4 hours with the game during a preview session, but Outlaws is split up kind of Starfield style, where each planet is its own open world. You can wander around and do your thing on each planet, and then when you hop in the Trailblazer, your ship, you cruise off into the sky in this mini cutscene that's more likely got a bit of a loading screen hiding behind it. In no way does this take away from the minute-to-minute gameplay, but when people hear open world Star Wars game, I think there's a tendency for people to think about the No Man's Sky approach of literally being able to take off anytime, anywhere, and manually fly your ship around from point to point. This is not that, but that also doesn't mean that it's bad. You've got plenty of stuff to do on the surface of planets, but then random encounters in space are similar to those events that are scattered around the world to keep things interesting when you're entering orbit or just cruising through space. But the style of the open world isn't the only thing that Starfield and Star Wars Outlaws have in common. The space combat feels very similar overall, and to be fair, most space combat feels pretty similar. Your ship has shields and a health bar, blasters and rockets, and you're fighting off enemy faction ships and TIE fighters in combat that gets the job done. They aren't really breaking any new ground here, but they also don't really have to. It's just solid. But when it comes to Star Wars Outlaws, the moment-to-moment gameplay is really what shines. This game is at its best when you're mid-mission sneaking through enemy territory plotting how you're going to handle the next batch of enemies, and in my opinion, Outlaws is a game that really lends itself to a stealth approach. Going in blasters blazing could turn out okay, but the beauty of the game is in scoping out an area, getting the lay of the land, and then getting Nix to distract enemies while you dart for the nearest cover or hack a door to keep on moving. And Nix is the most useful useful tool in your toolkit. This little dude can distract enemies, activate levers, trigger explosive, fetch weapons and health vials. He really can do it all, and he can even attack enemies, giving you a window to run up and finish the job. This is what Star Wars Outlaws does best, delivering an action game with combat that sprinkles in a little bit of strategy. Not too much, but enough to add some depth. On top of the actual combat, you've got traversal and puzzles that bridge that gap between the big fights, and there's a little bit of Uncharted DNA in here, with Kay shimmying from ledge to ledge and wandering through vents and landing some big jumps to get from point A to point B. And through it all, puzzles. You've got a lot of puzzles in this game. If you see a door or a computer panel, there's like a 90% chance you've probably got to hack it, and you've got a rhythm-based puzzle where you hit a trigger on beat, and then matching puzzles where you're given a set of icons and you're guessing the order until you land the right sequence. And these are overwhelmingly fine. I actually ended up going into the settings and turning them off after a few hours, which I appreciate the option to do. It's not that these are a bad part of the game, but once you've seen the first 5 or 10, you can kind of catch the drift of what you're going to be doing for the rest of the game. So what holds Star Wars Outlaws back? I said at the beginning of this review that Star Wars Outlaws is a good game, but not a great game, and everything that I've talked about so far in this review is good. The story is good, the gameplay is good, the world building is good, but the game is missing that polish that really makes something great. There's no getting around it. The facial animations in these in-engine cutscenes look rough. I mean, I'm talking empty eyes, uncanny valley rough. And it's those deep, meaningful story moments that help players build a connection with a character and their story. And when those fall flat, it takes away a big part of the emotion and the feeling of the game. And then randomly, more polished and pre-rendered cutscenes are tossed in for some of the key moments in the game that look jarringly good, to the point that I almost thought that someone was a new character they were introducing. There are moments when this game looks beautiful and feels alive, but then when you take a closer look at things like faces on the people you pass in a big city, it's missing those little details that transform a Star Wars video game into a Star Wars experience that you really throw yourself into. And while those little details might not matter in games that are focused on delivering punchy gameplay or just moving the story along, they absolutely matter when you're introducing a new cast of characters to a universe like Star Wars. At the end of the day, Star Wars Outlaws hit the expectations that I had for it, but it didn't really exceed them. The story is enjoyable, there's a wide open world that's got plenty of post-game content and things to do, and the gameplay and upgrade systems and faction system all feel good and get the job done. It's a good time if you're a Star Wars fan, or even a fan of sci-fi in general. Unfortunately, it's following a long line of Ubisoft games that are great games, but that lack an attention to detail and polish that end up holding the games back from hitting their full potential. And for all of those reasons, Star Wars Outlaws is good, but not great. And it gets a 7.5 out of 10 from me. But that's just my 2 cents, and I would love to know what you think about the game when it lands this week if you plan on diving in. And of course, as always, thank you so much to Ubisoft for sending over a code early for me to give the game a shot. But if you enjoyed this review and you're new here, hit that subscribe button down below for videos like this when big games drop, and we have a ton of new games coming out in the months ahead, so you know I'm going to have plenty of coverage. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.